What were you saying about your Scottish shortbread?
I've been in Scotland this week, hence being even shitter than usual on social media. I've been doing some hiking in the Highlands. Ockeye the New.
Very nice.
Yeah, it was lovely. It was beautiful.
And you were fueled on shortbread, were you?
There's no other way other than shortbread and whiskey to fuel yourself in Scotland, Tom.
Oh, bit haggis.
Literally all that's on the menu. Actually, do you know what? I didn't have any haggis. I was going to, because despite its description, it is delicious.
It is bloody lovely. Every year when we were at university, in the run-up to Burns Night, that was the only time you could get haggis at the supermarket, so I used to stock up. Come home with bags full of the stuff.
Oh, God. I mean, I remember this because they smell absolutely appalling when you cook them. Because you have to boil them, don't you? And they smell dreadful.
I think you might be right, actually. You boil them because it used to, traditionally, it was haggis in the stomach lining.
Yes, well, it still is.
Of an Englishman. And you boil it in that.
Still is.
Yeah. If you buy SMP ones, delicious.
Hey Tom, do you reckon the SMP have a special offer after Burns Night when they're trying to get rid of them, where you can buy one get one freedom? Cue intro music.
And that segues us nicely from last week's episode with bad jokes. Very nice. Cue music. Yes, very good. What we got this week then?
Oh, we need to do the intro first. Hold on.
Do the intro. Sorry, you do the intro. Hold your horses. Pull up your pants. Down with your socks.
Hang on. No, that's
socks off, pants up.
That's not the way. That's not the way we do things down south. Hold your horses, pants down. Hello and welcome to That Was Genius, the history podcast in which two friends on different sides of the world, that's me over here and Tom over there in New Zealand,
hello,
discuss history topics on a theme each week. The topic is decided a week in advance, but everything else that happens is a surprise. It's unscripted, it's unfunny,
not to us, we enjoy it,
as evidenced by last week, and it's chaotic, as you can probably tell. And what is our topic this week, Tom?
Heroic Frenchies, badass Frenchies, because we've been very mean to the French.
We have been
over the course of about 50 episodes, but been particularly bad over the last 3 or 4 episodes.
Le très mine.
Yes, nasturement.
Mais oui.
And mais très oui. And so I thought it was good that we just bring the world back into balance and we provide some examples of French people who actually are pretty hard ass.
Yes.
Badass, hard ass, fat ass, the works.
French ass.
Their ass can do anything.
Le derrière tough.
Le derrière concrete.
Mais oui. How have you found this week, Tom?
Good, very good. I must admit, rather busy week. Trying to sell everything we have in New Zealand and arrange to move back to the UK.
Yes.
But I've managed to produce some work, Sam. I have a piece of paper with writing on it in front of me.
The writing says French.
Triple
underlined.
Says, fuck me. I'm stuffed. Je suis stuffed. No, I've got some good content. I did find a kick-ass Frenchman.
Good.
I'm quite pleased with who I discovered. How about you?
Yeah.
You were torn, weren't you,
I
again?
was torn. And a little like...
Natalie Imbruglia. That's the one.
Natalie Imbruglia, yeah. And whatever noise that was.
That was the guitar solo.
Oh, was it?
You recognised that?
Yes. I was torn. I'm sitting on the one that I'm not going to talk about the one that I'm not doing.
Who are you sitting on? Are you sitting on Charles de Gaulle? Who are you sitting on?
Oh, is that who it is? I thought I could feel a moustache twiddling the back of my neck, tickling me gently, tickling my nape. Anyway, I was torn between two. Both are cheating. One's actually not French, so I am going to save. I'm going to save the one which was more cheating, and I'm going to gently steer us towards next week doing something where I can make life very easy for myself and just regurgitate that story. But no, I'm.
Where was the individual from then?
She did grow up in France, but she was half British, half Indian, half American. So everywhere except France.
Hold on.
And also, yes,
she was 1.5 people.
She was all woman, Tom. And
3 arms and 3 legs.
Yes.
3 eyes.
Damn it! This is a history podcast, not a maths podcast. She was a British citizen who was half Indian, half American.
Well, but where does the French bit come in then?
She grew up there.
So a third French, third Indian, a third British and a third Venezuelan.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Okay, right, got it sorted.
But I'm just doing a Frenchman instead. Or actually, I'm doing.
Oh, fair enough.
I'm doing a French expedition, actually.
Okay, a French expedition.
Which actually isn't an example of a hard-ass Frenchman as such. It's just the French being relatively competent in the face of British mass incompetence. So what I've done is I have flipped it around.
Yeah, okay.
In the sense that we usually do the British beating the French, don't we, sir? But today we were flipping it around, and I'm doing the French laughing at English childishness and stupidity.
That's okay. That still contributes to us, trying to
redress the balance.
Exactly. That's good. I like that.
It's le yin to le yang of our usual podcast. Yeah. Can I start us with a quote, Tom, this week? An amazing quote.
So long as it's relevant. Yes.
It is relevant. It's a quote.
I had a dream.
Yes. According to Abraham Lincoln, anything's a dildo if you're brave enough. Right. So this is a quote about dry January.
Why I had such a tall hat full of them.
Yeah.
And such a big beard. Store a few extras in there. He was basically just a giant dildo smuggler, Abraham Lincoln, wasn't he? Big cock smuggler.
Wow.
It's what he was known to his friends. He was known as Abraham Cock Smuggler. If you shook him, all of them flew out. His hat would fall off and knobs everywhere.
If he spun around too fast, it was like a Catherine Wheel of Dicks. As opposed
to a Richard World of Catherines.
There's a man with a beard so bushy you could store a Russian empress in it.
Where are we going?
Right. I have a quote, Tom. It's a quote about dry January from a French chef.
Okay.
So this is a quote in the Times newspaper in the UK from Gérard Idieu, chef at the acclaimed Les Récamiers restaurant in Paris, who's among a host of French celebrities who signed a letter condemning dry January as an affront to French culture. Obviously, the French are very big on their culture. And quote from this chef: "These days we are not allowed to drink, to smoke, or even to have a mistress. It is prohibition, prohibition, prohibition." Which I think is a wonderfully French quote.
Excellent. Well, I mean, you can have your lung cancer, broken families, and alcoholism if you really like.
Yeah. Thank you. Égalité, fraternité, liberté, Tom. Right, should we find something to flip?
Something French, something blue, something naughty, something Lou. What have we got?
We always flip CDs, but I've got a CD to flip.
I've got some steak. Oh, I wish I had a sausage on. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? But they're all stuffed up Abraham Lincoln's sleeves. What else can we find?
If Abraham Lincoln salutes extra hard, one goes right in his ear. Well, I think we're gonna have to do the album, Tom. I'm sorry.
You're gonna have to do the album.
This is getting
It an Air album?
Oh, I have an Air album. The one I've got in my hand is actually Saint Etienne.
Right.
Do you want the
sexy boy?
That's still Air. Would you like? Do you remember we did a video to that, didn't we?
Boy.
When we were drunk at university once.
Well, you've said it. I've got it on my laptop.
That's going on social media.
Boom. We've also got a wonderful hats routine.
We do have our wonderful hats routine.
In fairness, both of those videos are very French.
They are quite French, aren't they? They're very art house.
Yeah, they could win awards at Cannes. They could really... Yeah, they definitely could.
So this video is Tom and I I think relatively drunk. Well, I'm certainly drunk. I don't think you are because you didn't really drink at university.
No, it's just stupid.
Just being stupid. Yeah. Just dancing around in front of your webcam to Air's sexy boy with two helmets strapped under my t-shirt. Doing a striptease.
That's right. And I know people are getting hot under the collar right now.
Ooh, me
and
included.
The prospect of that.
Me included.
Yeah.
Let's flip this CD. Do you want the track listing or do you want the front or the back of the CD? Let's get this over with. We need to get moving. Front.
Done. Yes, chef.
There we go. Smash. It's the front, Tom. You win.
Right, I'm going to go first before I run out and forget what I wrote down. Okay.
There's only one word,
righty. Yeah, shit. Righty-tighty-to. I started this week's research by looking into French awards.
You started this week's research about half an hour ago. And we're 20 minutes into recording.
Yes, that's true. I went down this route because of the episode where I discussed Gunnar Stutsteby, the Norwegian, the most decorated Norwegian soldier. So I thought I'd do something equivalent
literally
for French.
Covered in wallpaper.
Oh, Stenciled to death. From looking and researching into medals and highly decorated individuals, I narrowed it down to a few very highly decorated Frenchmen with very colourful histories, and then I narrowed it even further down to this chap. Now, to start with, before I tell you who it is, here are a few of my favourite French orders, medals and decorations that I encountered in my research.
Oh, lovely. I think I might come across some of these. Go on.
Oh, excellent. Good. Here's the first one that I thought was quite interesting. The Order of Academic Palms, 1808, yes. Under Napoleon. And I couldn't quite work out why you distinguish the palm from the rest of the hand. I thought it was a bit weird. Really stupid fingers. Hello, I'm a thumb. So yeah, the Order of Academic Palms. Here's a really exciting one. This is the one that everyone wants to get. This is the big daddy. Honour Medal for Penitentiary Administration. Oh. Boom. Oh. Charles de Gaulle did a sabbatical as a prison officer just to get that one.
Yeah, well, you would, wouldn't you?
Best of the bunch. Oh,
famously
best of the bunch.
Not awarded to the guards at the Bastille. They were kicking themselves, Tom. Kicking themselves.
Clever history joke. That's good.
So I wouldn't call it a clever history joke.
Bit of a rarity, that. Save that one, listeners.
A snapshot. That's going in the Christmas special.
Here's another one. Here's the insignia for wounded civilians.
Ah.
That must have been on the production line for a long time.
So what insignia do you get for being a wounded civilian? Do you just put ouch at the end of your name?
A crotch? A crotch.
A crotch. Just you get to doodle a dick next to your name.
I meant to say crutch, but it came out wrong. Doodle a dick by your name. That's good. That sounds a bit ridiculous to me because here's some statistics. World War One, about 1.7 million French people died, and I think 1.4 of those are military deaths, although you get different figures from different
military
sources.
Deaths.
1.4 million military deaths.
Yes, I got that. I'm just being a twat.
3 million, yeah. Yes, other countries are closer to that figure.
Liechtenstein.
In World War II, the French did a lot better. Well, Switzerland. Actually, Switzerland in the Second World War had one person die, according to the records. And person.
I forget which war it was, but there was a war in which Liechtenstein got involved, and they came back with one more person than they left with because no one died and they made an Italian friend. I'm going to need to Google.
That's a good one. That can be one of your midweek videos. That's a good one. So yeah, World War II, the French had around 267,000 civilian deaths. Deaths? Fuck me.
Les shells, they are so loud.
This German music is very...
This pumping techno from across the Siegfried line. What is... Oh, sorry, what am I doing German?
Oh, this is... this is David Hasselhoff music. It is blowing my ears away. Get in the car. Get in the car. I cannot put up with it anymore.
My voiture. What is this? Well, la-di-da, the Germans with your working cars. Your functional engineering.
Deaths is what I meant to say. They had 267,000 civilian deaths in World War II and 218,000 military deaths. So they didn't actually, not a lot of French people, well, it's all relative, but they didn't lose a huge amount of lives in the Second World War, the French. Certainly not compared to the First World War. I was amazed at those figures. And certainly not compared to some other countries in the Second World War.
I'm going to put it out there that it is very difficult to run away from a trench. In the Second World War, there were no trenches. It was very easy to retreat. Sorry, not allowed, not in the spirit of this episode.
No, not this episode.
Not this time. Not this time.
No, but don't worry, we're going to bully some other country. I'm coming on to that.
Oh, thank fuck.
I didn't realise China lost 15 million people during the Second World War.
Oh, yeah, God, yes. China had a very, very, very bad time.
Awfully dreadful. We've lost.
Against Japan and latterly a little bit Soviet Russia.
Germany, 8 million. You'd expect that. I mean, they did start it, didn't they, really? And
they did.
Switzerland, 100. So
more than you'd think.
Bearing in mind they're a bunch of gold hoarding cowards.
Yes, I was going to say gold storing monkeys.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of highlights the ferociousness of the Swiss Army penknife, doesn't it? And the value of precision timekeeping. So yeah, the Swiss only lost 100 people. And nobody likes clog-wearing, muesli, enjoying, mountain yodeling, yellow-bellied Toblerone masticators. So I'm very much targeting the Swiss this episode.
You're not allowed to do the French, so you've gone just across the border.
Cowards. Anyway, there's also the honour medal for indirect taxation that I came across.
Oh, wow.
I don't quite get this one. Looks like sneaky ways to tax people, presumably. Why is my brie square? I'm afraid we're taxing round cheese containers now, so we've just adapted it and we're delivering them all in square containers. Yeah. Why is my baguette 8 feet long?
We tax by the loaf. Now, an 8-foot baguette a Frenchman would get down with. Squaring off his brie, though, they're going to get the guillotine back out. You square our cheese, we'll square your head.
Right, farmers, get in your tractors and blockade the roads.
Yes, we will drive very slowly.
There's the Medal of Mines.
Mimes?
Mime. Yeah, mimes.
Is that an award you just pretend to get given?
Exactly. You put it over your head. Oh, look at this. Oh, look at my medal. No, the mines. So
right.
Presumably it's like a dig your own medal situation. You know, like pick your own blueberries. It's like that. The honour medal for
you
work.
Know blueberries don't get mined.
So no, but you can pick your own blueberries, can't you? From the
you can
blueberry bush. Honour medal for work.
Well, it is quite unusual for the French to actually
won that one.
Yes, there we go.
Sorry. Let's try that again. You go first.
No. The interruption was more pure.
Okay. Surprisingly, the Spaniard has never won that award. So that was the honour medal for work. It's another good one. Order. This is a very old one. This is from 1234. Order of the Broom Cod.
Wow.
Presumably a fish that enjoyed sweeping.
Yes.
There's Order of the Porcupine from 1394.
Now, I've heard of this one.
No hedgehogs allowed.
What does the porcupine get you? I forget what the porcupine's for.
It's something to do with the fact that they face terror by pointing their prickles at it. It's a little bit like kids in the playground, let's be honest. A lot of these medieval orders. It's like, oh, do you want to join my gang? Yeah, do you want to join my... What should we call ourselves? Oh, we'll call ourselves the Porcupines because we point ourselves at danger.
Because we roll up into a ball to protect ourselves in the face of strife.
We get run over easily. Order of the Hop was another good one from 1406.
For brewing?
Yeah, it was actually brewing related. Order of the Hop. Yeah, not the hip.
Not the hippy dibby dibby that don't stop.
No, exactly.
Not for the bang bang boogie up jumps.
For the boogity boogity beat. Right, on to my main topic. So, the highly decorated French war hero that I'm going to talk about is a chap called Marcel Bigeard. Not big ears,
or
I
big
should point
beard.
out. Although he does have rather large ears, a little bit like a Ryder Cup. And he didn't have a mate called Noddy. So, it was actually Bigeard. And his nickname was Bruno. Marcel Bruno Bigeard. Have you heard of this chap?
No, I haven't. Marcel Bruno.
Marcel Bruno Bigeard. Bigeard? Bigeard bon. Boudan Expedition. Various ways of pronouncing it, depending in whereabouts in France you are.
Yes, and you are a long way from France.
Monsieur Big Ears started his military career in 1936 as a regular soldier and finished it in 1976 as a lieutenant general, which is quite unique because
quite a jump.
Absolutely, quite a jump. He went through a lot. And just for people who aren't familiar with Lieutenant General, it translates from French into Lieutenant General, if you're an English speaker. Thank you. At the start of the Second World War, he was stationed along the Maginot Line. The Nazis creatively marched around.
He was just sat there waiting to do something heroic.
We are waiting to shoot at our shit. We forgot to build it through Belgium. So they are just going to walk through Belgium. Okay.
It's not so much that you forget to build it through Belgium. You'd have to ask permission from the Belgians to build a French military line through there. I mean, asking Belgium for permission is not really the European way, but nevertheless, in the spirit of friendship.
Oh, they should have been a bit more pressing, shouldn't they? I mean, what's the point? What's the point in having a big, and what by all accounts was a very, very well-designed line of defences if you could just walk around the north of them? Bloody ridiculous. Anyway, he ended up in prison of war camp for about 18 months after that because he got captured when he was on the Maginot Line, but did manage to escape all the way to Senegal, of all places. which was a French territory. So he managed to get his way to Senegal. He fought in Africa for a while and then ended up with the Free French Forces, the FFF, which was, for people who don't know, essentially a government in exile during the Second World War, led by the very famous Charles de Gaulle, who we've mentioned a few times already. And towards the end of the war, he was parachuted into France and led numerous missions that led to him receiving the a British award for gallantry. So he had all sorts of awards.
Oh, but did he have the one for mining?
No, well, exactly. Or he never worked at prison either,
No.
as far as I'm aware. So, yeah, he didn't have the full collection.
You get disqualified for that one, having been a prisoner.
Well, not if you're French. I think there were medals for prisoners for successfully getting through being in prison. Anyway, here's a quote. "I do not accept the medals anymore because they are starting to fall on my shoes." That's what he said when interviewed in later life. So he was very, very, very well decorated.
It is not because I had many of them, it is because my jacket is horribly oversized. I am like a small boy wearing his granddad's overcoat.
Because I have very long arms. I have to have a very oversized jacket to keep my arms warm. Unfortunately, the downside is it looks like a skirt. After the war, now this is where it starts to get a bit juicy, Big Ears spent time in Indochina, where France was trying to reassert its dominance over its colonies in what turned out to be the First Indochina War, which ran from 1946 to 1954, and obviously was a precursor to the Vietnam War.
Yes.
Because the French were fighting the Viet Minh. This is where the story of Big Ears really takes off. And yes, I am calling him Big Ears because it's funny.
Because you can't pronounce his actual name.
No, as I proved, I can pronounce it in many different dialects. In 1952, he led his parachute battalion on an operation which ended up with them being surrounded by Vietnamese troops, outnumbered about 10-1, and he managed to break out of the encirclement and lead his men and the wounded back to a French base over, I think I read it was a 4-day hike through the jungle.
Wow.
So here we start to develop the legend of Big Ears. He was famous for his devotion to his physical fitness. He was one of the fittest soldiers in the whole French army, it was claimed. He also had an incredible willingness to do everything expected of his regular troops. So he got down and dirty with his regular troops, and he was very critical of other senior military figures who sort of sat around, got fat, and let all the young lads do all the hard work. He was notorious as well for putting his soldiers through their paces and making sure they were in great shape, and he would cut back on their rations. He wouldn't allow them to drink wine, didn't allow them to go and spend too long in whorehouses.
What kind of Frenchman is this?
Well, this chef you mentioned earlier would have been very unhappy.
Indeed. Is he secretly an American, hiding as a Frenchman?
Exactly. I think he had been touched by the Viet Minh. I think he was a spy. He was very, very tight with those sort of things. Physical fitness and discipline. He was very tight on his people. Here's a quote. "It is possible, it will be done. And if it is impossible, it will still be done." Very determined chap was Big Ears. Despite a heroic last stand at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, which one historian likened to the Spartans at Thermopylae, the famous 300, this battle at the end of the First Indochina War, Big Ears, I think he had 800 men under his command, and only about 40 of them survived because they fought ferociously to the end, taking heaps of Vietnamese lives.
That sounds pretty bad.
Yeah, no, it's not. It wasn't great for them, but I think it was far worse for the attacking Viet Minh.
It usually was.
He was captured at this battle, eventually, and was made a prisoner of war. But his physical fitness stood him in really good stead when the Vietnamese death marched the surviving French forces to a prisoner of war camp, and around 4,000 of the 10,000 French captured survived this. About 6,000 French soldiers died in this death march.
Jeez.
And he was released 4 months later because, this was very close to the end of the First Indochina War. 1956, Big Ears' next adventure was in Algeria, where he found himself fighting the Algerian National Liberation Front, who wanted Algerian independence. And very early on at his time in Algeria...
He's been involved in all of the slightly dubious colonial wars, hasn't he?
Yeah, you say dubious. Yeah, you've obviously heard about this.
Yes.
Have you heard of French conduct in Algeria? Yeah.
Yes, slightly familiar with it, yes.
And early on, Big Ears survived 3 bullets to the chest, 1 during a small battle, a skirmish, and 2 as part of an assassination attempt while he was jogging along a beach, I think I read.
Wow.
And he survived them and carried on. So he's an incredibly fit guy that just seemed to bounce off anything that was thrown his way. And yes, the Algerian War was brutal, with both sides responsible for a lot of atrocities. So the FLN, that was the Algerian National Liberation Front, basically adopted terror tactics and bombed public places, loosely targeting French Algerians, particularly Muslim French Algerians. And often it was a pretty young Algerian girl would walk into a public place, put a bomb in a bin, and then run off and it would explode. These FLN terrorists, for want of a better word, were particularly fond of killing people with what was called the Algerian smile, which was where they'd cut the throat of their victims, rip out their tongues, and just leave them to bleed on the streets.
Oh, Jesus.
So the FLN weren't particularly nice, but the French, and Big Ears was a prominent figure in this, were equally as brutal. They basically decided to meet brutality with brutality, and it actually did work in a sense. Curfews, for example, were put in place in various areas with violent enforcement, so people would be shot and left to rot in the streets if they broke the curfew, and that was as a sign to the people that it was the French that were in charge, and the French were going to be worse than the FLN, which was an interesting tactic to win hearts and minds. And torture was also prevalent, so the French liked to electrocute suspects' genitals. That was a popular thing for them to do, to get information. Thousands of native Algerians went missing, and it's rumoured that actually Big Ears himself ordered them to be dropped from planes into the ocean to drown. So thousands of Algerians went missing. Weirdly, though, when one of the FLN leaders was captured, Bigeard ensured that he was treated with huge respect. I think he gave him a bit of a military send-off when he was sort of handed over to another senior French official's custody.
They gave him a nice salute as they threw him out of the aircraft. When we threw him out of the plane, we got the trumpet out, we gave him a little toot-toot-toot-toot. With the order of parachutists, we pinned it to his chest and pushed him out.
As a very generous gesture, we threw out a rubber swan with him that he could, take down with him. No, he was ridiculously pleasant to this leader of the FLN and sat down, had a drink with him, refused to have him treated badly in any way. But another French leader eventually got custody of this Algerian leader and I think had him hung and made to look like a suicide.
Jeffrey?
What's that?
A little Epstein joke.
Oh, sorry. I've missed it completely. On the whole, the French tactics in Algeria in terms of taking control and controlling the revolt, the independence movement, were very successful. However, the flip side of that was they were very unpopular back home in France because there were rumours of the brutality and the French people weren't too happy about it. Anyway, it didn't take long for the Algerians to be given their independence by the French, and then obviously there was no use for old Big Ears.
No.
Through the 60s and 70s, he was stationed in various places and he continued to demonstrate his idiosyncrasies that made him so popular with his men. For example, he was almost drowned and eaten by sharks simultaneously when he parachuted in to meet some of his new men under his command and was blown into the Indian Ocean because he was actually aiming to land in Madagascar. Broken arm as well, I think.
And that's where they got the idea for Algeria from the sounds of it.
Yes, quite possibly. Yeah, just don't give him a parachute. He went on to work in politics. His reputation rather confused. On the one hand, an incredibly strong, resilient, successful military leader, and the other, someone willing to condone torture. And this legacy lived with him right up to his death. He was quite heavily criticised for his role in the torture in Algeria. And he died in 2010, buried with full military honours at the age of 94. There you have it. Oh, wow. So that is the story of Marcel Big Ears.
Fair enough. I mean, he fits the brief, doesn't he? He's a badass Frenchman, one way or another.
Absolutely. Those who have written biographies about this chap say he was an incredible commander, absolutely incredible military commander. And it's probably that ruthlessness that probably didn't make him so good when trying to win hearts and minds in Algeria. But yes, and interestingly as well, he's often used, and I didn't realise this until the end of my research, he's often used as an example to counter the French stereotype of retreating when under attack. It's all a bit of light banter, isn't it?
It is, until some Algerians die.
Yes, that's not such light banter. But, two sides to every story. They were bombing innocent people in the streets. So,
well, yeah, very true. Very true.
Not that should allow torture, but there you go.
Two wrongs don't make a right.
No.
They make a droite. That's right in French.
Yeah, no, I know droite. I was trying to remember what left is.
Gauche.
A gauche, à droite.
A gauche. Tournez à gauche.
You're quite good at French, aren't you?
No, I'm not.
You're quite good. You got my soggy biscuit.
I did get, yes,
but you understood soggy biscuit very quickly.
Well, I've got a very limited vocabulary, Tom. It's only the things I've needed to use over the years that I remember. One baguette and a soggy biscuit, please. Well, that's very interesting, Tom. Well done. You found a badass Frenchman. I didn't. I was disappointed I didn't find a real badass
guy who had a medal for penitentiary administration. But hey, there's only so much time I've got to research. Or someone from the Order of the Broom Cod.
Yes, well, we'll look that up. We'll see if we can find an impressive broom cod. Yes, Tom, I've not got one badass Frenchman today. I've got a whole badass French expedition, which was also, actually, quite possibly, a badass and really quite obvious French espionage mission with a view to invading Australia.
Wow.
Did you know that the French nearly invaded Australia, Tom?
When was this?
Well, steady now. I'm one sentence in. All the details will come. Just cool your boots.
Oh, don't ask me rhetorical questions then. Okay.
Fair enough.
Tell me more.
Oh, well.
Did they find any boomerangs?
They didn't have a car for a start because it was in 1800.
Ah.
And this is a funny story, not so much because the French were particularly good or bad, but because the British were so utterly useless.
Yep.
It's called the Boudan Expedition, and it sailed from 1800 to 1803. Now, in March 1800, Napoleon, averagely sized man from Sardinia.
As opposed to an averagely... As opposed to an averagely sized sardine from Corsica.
Yeah, Corsica, not Sardinia, sorry, Corsica.
Yep.
Was approached by a gang from the French National Society of...
I don't know.
Averagely sized Corsican.
Carry on. Yeah, with you.
Was approached by a gang from the French National Society of Science and the Arts, which, as a society name, is a bit of a catch-all. Just the society for bloody everything.
Yeah, it is really, isn't it?
These men were led by an experienced sea trader and explorer called Nicholas Boudan, and they wanted permission and funding to go and explore and map the coast of New Holland, which is what we would now call Australia. And they were going to explore it and bring back lots of exciting specimens and fun things. Presumably, being Frenchmen, these were things to put in your mouth or up your bottom.
Oh, boomerang.
Oh, yeah, well...
Oh, yeah, what you want, mate? You want a boomerang. You can get right round the U-bend with one of those, I tell you.
What we call that.
Right round.
Or a boomerang, or as it's known
what if it gets sucked up there? It comes straight back out again.
Yep, absolutely. Or as it's known to the Americans, the double-ended Lincoln.
Yeah. Oh, dear. The 12-inch Abraham. Yep.
Yeah. The stovepipe hat. So Boudan was given permission to sail and left France in October with 2 ships fittingly named Géographie and Naturist. That's not to be confused with the good ship Naturist, famed for its unusually large mast and hairy deck.
Knew where that was going straight away.
Yeah, you did.
I just imagine all the soldiers lining up at port and being told which boat they're going to go on. Yeah, right. You there, you are going on the Naturist, take off your clothes. Yes. You are going on Geography. You, Naturist, take off your clothes. You, Geography. You can keep your clothes on. Everyone on the Naturist has to go in the nip. Cut yours out.
It is very cold out. You may want to smear some kind of goose fat all over your tallywhacker.
We almost... when we first moved out to New Zealand, a group of friends, myself included. Yes, I do have friends. Well, I did have friends. I was quite pleased with myself when I first arrived in New Zealand.
That didn't last.
We all arranged to go... No, I didn't last. Wankers. We arranged to go up about 5 hours north of Christchurch for a big cycling event. It's a very popular cycling event in Blenheim. All the hotels and B&Bs and things had all been booked out. So one of the members of our party booked somewhere, and she was delighted. She sent a message out to everyone saying, "Oh, I've booked this place. It looks really, really good." And I researched it just to see where it was, and it was actually a naturist colony. So we then, what ensued was a debate as to whether or not we should go.
You went, didn't you? You went.
I was game. Yeah.
You took your clothes off as soon as you Googled it.
Yeah. I rode the event naked. I was on my bike in the nip.
Oh dear. That's some chafing. Anyway, so after 6 months at sea and a voyage in which everyone got very ill and they ran out of food, which is frankly nothing particularly unusual when it comes to 19th century naval exploration.
Particularly around Australia.
Yes, they very quickly ran out of frogs' legs and got a bit sad. But by all counts, the exploration actually all went very well.
The bullfrogs hadn't arrived yet, had they? So they didn't have any of the bloody bullfrogs
No, well,
in Australia. If they had been there before, and the Frenchies would have been delighted.
there was literally no food anywhere. I cannot eat this, it is a vegetable.
What am I supposed to do with this?
All we have is cows. What do we do with fucking cows?
And lots of these very bouncy things. They are bouncing around, punching each other.
Very difficult to
Boing.
eat.
Boing.
And because
Boing.
they seem to be
Very,
fighting,
very.
we don't really want to get involved.
Have you seen kangaroo fights?
Yeah, they're brutal.
Absolutely. Just don't wombat baiting. A little bit more boring.
Yeah, koala caging as well. Not much fun. So anyway, by all counts, the exploration actually went very well because unlike British explorers that we've talked about before, Tom, the French took these things seriously. They didn't bring a chest of drawers or a rum distillery. They didn't bring 500 camels and a school choir. They just brought lots of scientists and were led by a very competent and very experienced captain, which frankly is just shit, isn't it? I mean, this
Sounds boring to me.
This just isn't Tom.
Yeah.
Tom. Firstly, you pack light,
Where
then
are
you
we
put
going
someone
with this?
competent
Come
in
on.
charge. Then, Tom, not only that, they treated the natives with respect.
What?
They got on well with them and traded food with them,
What are they thinking about?
learning about their culture. What the fuck is this?
Only the French would do that.
What kind of empire
Yeah,
are you?
well, exactly. That's
I
why
know.
the British Empire was bigger.
Yeah, damn straight.
Treated people how they deserved to be treated.
Yes.
Bloody
Absolutely. What is this? Anyway, by the end of 1802, the expedition finally reached Port Jackson, which is modern-day Sydney. And at this point, Britain and France were at peace, so the British/Australians were very happy to have the company of some fellow European gentlemen to make up for the transported Cockneys and Irishmen they normally had to deal with for company. So, having completed a successful voyage, the Naturist was sent home packed with... They've had a really good voyage.
Nudes. Packed to the rafters with naked people.
Cocks on deck, just nothing but
Butt
todgers.
cheek to butt cheek.
Just a hold full of genitals. As the people at home will love this.
Holes of genitals. Imagine them arriving at port with a welcome party, waving them in. Hello, bonjour, hello, it is a naturalist boat. We are all arriving. Butt naked.
No, that was the Naturist, Tom. That was the Naturist. We have come
Which
back.
one got sent back, sorry?
The Naturalist got sent back, not the Naturist. The Naturist didn't exist. It was a joke
sorry, not
ship.
that, okay.
Arriving at port,
No, it did exist. Come
all the
on.
ladies of the town came out to wave in the sailors, who flirted with them by throwing cocks overboard. Anyway, yes, the Naturalist was sent home packed with 2,500 new species and plenty of future food for besieged Parisians in the form of emus and black swans as a specific gift for Napoleon's Josephine. Nice. Another reference to an old episode. Meanwhile, the British got on so well with the French, they even sold them a replacement ship. So far, this all sounds very boring, doesn't it? I've been forced to make a dick joke and a derogatory comment about the French putting things up their bottoms just to keep it interesting. But wait, Tom, because there's two aspects to this story which
worked.
Thanks. There's two aspects to this story which are much more fun. The first is a lovely bit of British incompetence, and the second is the real reason behind the expedition. So let's do the British incompetence first. In 18...
There's a twist, is there?
There's a twist. In 1801, knowing that the French would have their beady little frog eyes on his big old Isle of Roo, the governor of Australia, a guy called Philip Gidley King, sent out his chief surveyor.
What was his name? Philip Gidley King.
Philip Gidley King. Good Australian name.
Philip Gidley King. Hi, g'day, mate. I'm Philip Gidley King.
Pleasure to meet
from
you, Bruce.
Doolawonga.
Well, quite. Philip Gidley King. And Philip Gidley King sent out his official chief surveyor to explore and claim as much of South Australia as he could for king and country. Now, the chief surveyor...
Harry Fogley Smith.
Actually, no, he's got a reasonable Australian name as well.
Larry Wiggly Woo.
Yes.
What was his name?
Jimmy Knifey Spoony. The chief surveyor was a 19-year-old guy called Charles Grimes. Charles Grimes.
Grimy by name, Grimes by nature.
Absolutely.
Don't like to wash.
Yeah. Very, very unclean man. Terrible halitosis.
Very oily texture to his skin.
Yes. So... Australia was somewhat short of people at this point, so the chief surveyor for Sydney was a 19-year-old. On that basis, the deputy chief surveyor and assistant surveyors were probably just about old enough to draw a tree and colour in the lines of the map. So he was off exploring and putting up flags and being very British and claiming things for Britain. Anyway, when the French rolled up in Sydney, Governor King and Boudan had a whale of a time. They got on like a house on fire. So much so that Boudan had been allowed to stay for 5 months and obviously buy this ship. King being absolutely positively sure that it was only going to be used for science and definitely not for invading or colonising, right? Because he liked him. He liked Boudan. He's nice. Yep. He seems like a gentleman. So whilst all of this was going on and those two were having a whale of a time, a drunk French officer had let slip over wine one night to his British counterparts that they wanted to start a settlement, a little village, a ville, if you like, in Van Diemen's Land, which is what's now known as Tasmania, a place the British hadn't yet claimed.
Oh.
So when news of this reached Governor King, he panicked, Tom. He panicked and decided that no matter how nice this particular Frenchman was, he didn't want him as a neighbour. Sorry, I should do that in Australian accent, shouldn't I? I like you, mate. I like you, but I don't want any dirty foreigners next door driving down house prices.
Nice. Like what you did there.
Unfortunately, if Australia was already short of map makers and flag planters, it was really short of sailors and colonisers. Australia, Tom, had at this point one ship. They had 2 ships, but just sold one to the French. They just
fucking sold it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the one ship they had left was called the Cumberland. It was the first seagoing ship that Australia had ever built.
The Cumberland.
Which is also one of Abraham Lincoln's favourite accessories.
It's so English here. I think we should name the boat after our favourite sausage.
Yes.
And the Cumberland.
Yes.
What should we name the other boat? We've only got 2.
Yes.
I don't know.
Well, Tom, the problem with the
What's
Cumberland...
another famous type of sausage?
The Lincolnshire.
Lincolnshire. They're 2 good sausages.
Our
very
second
good
ship,
sausages,
the Pork Banger, was...
Yeah. Or mash.
Yes. Renamed by the French the Naturist. The ship Cumberland was tiny. Australia had started small. It was just 40 feet long and weighed 30 tons. A really small ship, about the size of a yacht.
Australia was bigger than that. Australia was definitely bigger than that.
At least 60 feet long.
It was a wee bit bigger. Australia hasn't grown that big in the last 200 years.
Oh, they grow up so fast, don't they? It was a tiny ship, just 40 feet long and 30 tons, and it didn't really have a crew, so was given over to be captained by a 21-year-old midshipman called Charles Robbins. Now, for reference, and if you haven't watched Hornblower or Master and Commander, a midshipman is the lowest ranking officer in the Royal Navy. It's a rank you could achieve at 12 years old, Tom.
Yeah.
Australia was seriously short of crew. It was essentially like Neverland. It was a colony entirely run by prisoners, pirates and children. And yet Robbins, at the age of 21 and fresh out of the Naval College, was promoted to acting lieutenant commander and given this little ship, along with 16 crew, including Grimes, the surveyor, a handful of Royal Marines, and a gardener, presumably to plant a little raised bed around the flag, and told to bugger off and not come back until he'd gone and claimed Tasmania from under the noses of the French.
Right.
Sure enough, in 1802, this little ship rocked up at Sea Elephant Bay on what's now known as King Island to find those dastardly Frenchies already there. The British panicked. Robbins dashed ashore with a few of his crew, pulled out a letter from Governor King to Boudan saying, "This wasn't a very nice thing of you to do to a friend," whipped out a Union Jack and tied it to a tree before the French had managed to get out a Sacre Bleu. Now, the Union Jack... Boom. Done. Claimed for Britain. Now, the Union Jack was quite a new flag at this point, and Robbins was quite a new sailor, so he made a total hash of this ceremony. Firstly, he put the flag on upside down, much to the amusement of the French.
Oh.
Secondly, he hadn't been storing it properly, and Boudan later commented that it looked like the crew had been using it to strain soup. It was absolutely filthy and really crinkled. Thirdly, he hadn't really brought a script with him to claim the land properly and wasn't much of a public speaker, being a sailor at 21 years old. So he just mumbled some words about naming it King Island on behalf of Governor King and for the King. No, hang on. I named this island King Island for the King and also Mr. King And this is his island. That's the King's Island, not Mr. King's Island, but I've named it after him because he's very nice and he told me to do it. And it's a very nice island, and I'm sure Mr. King and the King will be very pleased.
Terribly sorry, I've actually accidentally I thought it was a flag, but it's actually my dirty washing.
Yes.
Oh, God, go back in. Go and get the proper flag, not my underwear.
Hang on a second, this isn't the Union Jack. This is Surveyor Charles Grimes' unwashed Union Jack boxer shorts.
I won't make a wet dream joke. Carry on.
I knew that was where you were going to go. Even more embarrassingly than not having written the script and putting the flag on upside down, he ordered the 3 Marines to fire a ceremonial volley to officially claim this land for Britain, but then realised that he'd forgotten to bring any gunpowder from the ship. So he had to borrow some from the French.
Right.
Which they thought was hilarious, and then the Royal Marines, being arseholes, deliberately fired their ceremonial volley worryingly close above the French's heads. The French thought all of this... I thought
you'd say it's some Aboriginals.
No, that came later and consistently through the next 2 centuries. Bear in mind, the French thought this was absolutely hilarious. They had over 100 men on the island to Robins's 17, and their ship, the Géographie, was 10 times the size of the Cumberland. Boudan, in a cutting remark, very French, told Robbins, "Do not worry, we never had any intention of colonising a land already inhabited by savages."
Oh.
Which is about the worst thing that you could say to a Brit.
Take that. That's nasty, isn't it?
Isn't it? Not very friendly. The French response to this was quite hilarious. They then left the site of the new colony, which consisted of 1 flag, a hat with a hole in it from a low-fired bullet, and 17 Englishmen, and left and went about annoying the British by naming everything everywhere that they could find on King Island after French things. This rock, I shall name this French rock. I shall name this Paris Cove. I shall name this...
Derriere Point. This one can be...
And whilst they were doing this...
Zidane Cove. This one...
there is literally nothing else, so I shall name this spot Nothing Toulouse. What else can we call?
Oh, very nice. This one can be Bonaparte's Bottom. This one...
Yes. And so whilst they were doing this and running around filling in their map with good French names for things, Grimes, the surveyor, was literally running along about half an hour behind them, renaming everything after British things, getting very flustered. So
oh dear.
So they just went around really annoying the British, basically playing a game of British Bulldog in which they were like, tag, this tree's French, tag, this rock's French. The British, who were outnumbered 5-1, were just running around like, no, definitely British.
No, it's ours. No, leave that. Don't touch that. Leave it alone.
Leave it.
That's ours. No, that's Bellamy's bottom, not Bonaparte's bottom. How dare you?
I name this bottom after His Majesty the King. The French eventually got tired of annoying the British and went off and sailed away and carried on their very successful expedition and eventually sailed home back to Mauritius. The only real repercussion from this was once Boudan had stopped laughing, he did write a letter to King calling him a massive child who needed to take better care of his flags. So actually, that was from this international incident, that was the only outcome of it, is the British planted a flag and the French wrote a letter calling them enormous children.
Which is fairly accurate.
But there was another part to this whole affair, Tom, and that was the invasion. The Boudan Expedition wasn't just scientific. Oh, no. It was a detailed map of the defences and strategic value of Australia and Port Jackson, presented to French authorities in Mauritius and in Paris with a view to capturing or destroying the colony in the long term. Now, there were 2 reports written up by members of the expedition suggesting an invasion. The most important and detailed one was by a geographer called François-Auguste Perron, who saw Australia as a major threat to Spanish South America, which needed to be crushed. Spain and France at this point were allies. His report wasn't fully discovered or fully translated until 1998. But it's really interesting, and he wrote to the governor of Ile-de-France, which is now Mauritius, that Napoleon himself had sent them up to Australia to draw up invasion plans as part of the expedition. And he wrote in this letter, "All of our natural history researches, extolled with so much ostentation by the government of France, were merely a pretext for its enterprise." So really, this whole thing was a spy mission to invade Australia. and he claimed to be quite the undercover expert himself, writing, "I was able to gain the confidence of the Governor of Australia, his secretary, the lieutenant, and most of the civil and military officers, the colonial doctors, Protestant ministers, and the nature of my work, in my double title of doctor and naturalist, made me less suspect and allowed me to ask a mass of questions and walk around naked." Sorry, naturalist, not naturist. "Which, coming from anyone else, would have been badly received. I visited most parts of the colony, the flocks, the countryside. I questioned the farmers to obtain exact information, which may be useful to the interests of my country." So he claimed that he was quite the expert, although he later rolled this back a little bit, saying that actually he was just an interested amateur. You know, because amateurs like to plan invasions. But his plan was pretty dastardly. It involved shipping a force of 1,800 French soldiers in a fleet to Australia, sailing a few dozen miles south of major shipping routes to avoid detection. After a 6-month voyage, which would have been absolute hell, they would sail around the south of Australia, capturing any British settlements on the way and sinking any ships to avoid alerting authorities. And what their plan was to do was to bring any transported labourers that they came across, especially Irish dissidents, on board to provide intelligence in exchange for freedom. They would then sneak upon Sydney at night near, quote, "a malt house belonging to a man named Smith." Not the other malt houses, very specifically Smith's malt house.
That is very specific, isn't it?
Because he makes the best booze, the best wine and brandy. And he thought that once they'd landed, they would be able to march on Sydney completely unopposed. He'd gotten drunk with and talked to quite a lot of the local guards and militia and knew that they had no stomach for a fight. They didn't even want to be in Australia. They would rather be at home and would surrender without bloodshed. He also knew that most of the Irish prisoners who'd been transported to Sydney and the colonies hated the British. They were political prisoners. So much so that the French's main job would actually be to avoid a massacre of the colonial masters by the Irish. He really wanted to keep most of the British colonial officers in place because he'd been very impressed with the way that the island was being run. Nevertheless, he also suggested bringing 2,000 extra guns to form an Irish colonial army. The captured British would be shipped home in exchange for French prisoners. Political prisoners within Sydney would be released and everyone else would be given shortened sentences to win them over. Most importantly, no one needed to die, or very, very few people would need to die. It would all be very, very, very easy. And once the war was over, either France could keep the colony or could return it in negotiations to great French advantage once the France had won the war. However, he made very specific stipulations, which is again where this very much isn't Britain, that this would only be allowed so long as the Irish troops were protected and promised safe passage, which is very honourable of him, isn't it? Because the British would usually let colonial or imperial troops be absolutely dicked on.
Too right.
Quite right too, yes. And Tom, it very nearly happened. In 1810, Napoleon ordered that Ile-de-France, or Mauritius, plan for an invasion of New South Wales. And just a few months later, a British ship, the Broxbury, reported seeing, or at least seeing reports of, 3 or 4 French frigates, large French warships, heading for Australia. Although bad weather apparently had sunk a couple and dispersed the rest, who returned home. Nothing officially was ever written up about this invasion, but it is entirely possible that France, on the basis of these reports, did actually launch an invasion of Australia. It just got beaten by the weather. So who knows, Tom? Maybe it's just rumour, but maybe, just maybe, Australians could have been eating cane toad or bullfrog legs and speaking with an even worse accent today. We'll never know.
God, yeah.
We will never know.
And so presumably this plan was put aside after the French turned on the Spanish. When was that? 1812?
I mean, who knows? Well, if France had won the colony, if France had conquered the colony, they could then have used it to invade South America.
True.
The importance of Australia wasn't just that it was a British colony and that it was flying a British flag, it was that it was a good back route to the Spanish gold mines and gold reserves in South America.
Very interesting game of strategy there, Sam, that you've come across in your research.
Indeed.
Very interesting.
Indeed. So not so much a kick-ass Frenchman as such, but an oddly successful mission of exploration.
Yes, led by the French.
And some British incompetence, led by the French.
It's interesting. I can't pick out anything silly. So all I can say is interesting.
Well, I mean, that's as good a place as any to end.
We've done the sausage. We've done nudists.
Yep, we've done the Frenchmen sticking things up their bottoms and silly accents. That's all we need to do. So in that case, we should probably think of something to talk about next week, shouldn't we?
Oh, now what did I thought? That's one I thought of. World's firsts.
Ooh.
Yeah.
To mark our 1 year anniversary because it's going to be our 52nd episode. 52nd
That's
proper
true.
episode.
Yeah.
Okay, world firsts. That sounds like a really good one, yeah.
Hold on, didn't we? Have we done our shout-outs to people yet?
Oh yes, let's do some shout-outs before we go.
There's Nanan, who chose to do A-level history because he likes cock jokes.
Good.
Yeah, so he doesn't understand all the 90s references. I'm assuming it's a bloke, by the way, but probably isn't.
I mean, if he's in university now, he's definitely not going to understand the 90s references. Ask your parents.
No. Yeah. Thank you, Nanan. There was that. He gave us some comments. Did we get anything on Facebook as well?
What have we had on Facebook other than the obvious incredible video of Viagra in the water?
Yeah,
from Trina. It was instant rigor mortis. What a hard way to die. Save your sons, shield your daughters. There's Viagra in the water.
You've got a far better memory than I do.
We are, of course, talking about Viagra in the water, as teased to us by listener Trina Van Hawkins a few weeks ago. And
no, Trina Van Hawkins.
Trina
She's
Van
changed
Hawkins,
the name.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sending us through the video of that. You have more than earned your That Was Genius mug coming to you after a short delay once I get one more printed.
I was thinking we could leave it until next week and then try and do the whole thing.
Yes. Well, let's bring it back next week and do the whole song.
Yeah, sounds very good. I think that sounds fair. We need a bit more time to rehearse.
We do. Well, evidently as...
It's a long song, isn't it?
It is quite a long song.
I was expecting a little ditty, but God, it's about 5 verses.
The audience delivers, Tom. The audience delivers.
Yes, it's nice to take back, isn't it, sometimes? It's nice to listen to our listeners.
It is nice to take, Tom. It can't all be give.
No, it can't. We can't just
It's
be all
exhausting.
charity.
It's exhausting.
It is. So do send us some audio of you heavily breathing and all sorts of other things. It'd be lovely to hear.
Well, I was going to suggest other rude songs that you might know, but yeah, I mean...
Heavy breathing's fine. Oh, yeah, or what about playground songs? Because they're funny, because they're rude and they make no sense either.
Yes.
Like Batman and Robin in the Batmobile. Batman did a fart and paralysed the wheel. The wheel couldn't take it, the engine fell apart, all because of Superman's supersonic fart.
I like that one.
Makes no sense.
How about... The Addams family started when Uncle Fester farted. He
farted through the keyhole and paralysed the cat. Doodle-doo.
The cat got all excited and shouted, Man United! And Man United shouted, The Addams family. Doodle-doo.
Very nice.
So yes, if you do have any songs, do... I don't know what we're going to do with them. Put them in a great big collage.
An audio collage,
Yeah.
just white noise.
Yep. Do send us any
to
recording. Yeah. Oh, will they? Put your children to sleep, and they'll wake up singing horrendous songs. Yeah, do send them to us on Facebook Messenger if you like, with That Was Genius Podcast. Or email us, thatwasgeniuscast@gmail.com with your horrendous playground songs.
Oh, brilliant. I look forward to that.
And audience, you can look forward to us trying to learn Viagra in the water next week.
This is going to require quite a lot of hard work.
So to speak.
Yeah. Oh, hello.
It's Viagra in the water. Maybe we should just do a Chaz and Dave version of it.
All right, yeah, so what should we do next week? So you mentioned... what did you say?
Let's do Spies in a coming week. I think Spies is a good one, but I think World First is a great idea.
Excellent.
In the meantime, thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, write us a nice review on your podcasting app of choice. Do get in touch with us. You can find us on Twitter, _was_genius, Instagram @thatwasgenius, and Facebook, That Was Genius Podcast. In the meantime, say goodbye, Tom.
Bye.
And it's goodbye from me, and we will see you next week.